Hello and welcome to another edition of The Stew with JT Brew. I'm your host, Justin Taylor. We want to thank Fantasy and Frames, our new home for The Stew. This is our first episode on Fantasy and Frames. So if you haven't followed them, check them out. Go to their YouTube page, follow, subscribe. You can also go to the Stew page, follow, subscribe there so you know when my show's coming on. Great show for you today. I'm John Bauer from the Dynasty Theory podcast. We're going to be going over rookie tiers, kind of talking about his idea of how he sets up his sheets, how he sets up his rankings, and kind of talk a little bit about like Discord and running a podcast and what all that is like. So stick with us. You're in the stew now.
You up on trades and why you move, you ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points, makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release, we started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of the leaderboard. Quite obviously not a scrub, so start an institute, make evaluations like a commissioner do. It's to the point your wife make you watch in a different room. Update your roster and pick and choose when you get some news. Not much that we enjoy more than sipping through, sifting through the statistics to make it to our end zones through different routes. Universities, institutes, down to homies who click in groups. I introduce you to the Stew with JT Brew.
I want to welcome in my guest today, John Bauer. JB, thanks for coming on the show. I know we've been talking about trying to do this for a while now, and we're finally able to get ourselves a little time here together to talk about it. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, we BS with each other pretty much every day. It's good to finally be able to jump on and talk in person, if you will. I mean, it's been a busy time of the year. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And we're going to get to some rookie draft talk and where we're ranking guys here a little bit at the end of the show. But to kind of start things off, for people that aren't aware of you or know kind of what you do in the industry, kind of tell us about your podcast, Dynasty Theory, on Dynasty Football League, our Dynasty League Football, DLF, who you work for and who I also write for. Kind of give us a little breakdown of what you guys do over there with Mitch and Coach Dan.
Yeah, so Mitch and I, we started at the time the Super Flexology Fantasy Football podcast 5 years ago last month. And we were kind of trying to figure out our niche, what we really wanted to get involved in. And at the time we were like, well, you know, we don't want to just be fantasy football. We kind of wanted to have a hyper focus. So obviously with the name Super Flexology, that's exactly kind of what it implies, super flex. And we were trying to figure out like, okay, once the season rolls around, how are we really gonna go about, you know, putting up our content on a weekly basis? And did a kind of a start sit show and absolutely hated that. It was trash. And then we brought Dan in and early 2020 refocused and wanted to kind of, you know, hey, we are a dynasty fantasy football show. So that's when we came up with the name Dynasty Theory. And coming up with the name, I feel like we brainstormed at least 100 different names. And that's what we settled on. But yeah, we're, you know, every single week, every single day, we're extremely focused on Dynasty Fantasy Football, the overarching strategies. We have Dan on the show, who is a former player, a former coach. He brings that mentality to the show and that perspective. And Mitch and myself, you know, Mitch is kind of in the middle from a film and analytical standpoint. And me, I'm very spreadsheet oriented. I'm very number oriented. I mean, look at me. I did not play football. I wasn't on the field. Well, correction. I played Pee Wee football in, I think, like third or fourth grade. That almost lasted 2 full seasons. Had to quit just because I was soft out there, JT. But yeah, like you know, the theory aspect is so critical, and it's something that really fascinates me. And especially if you're in a bunch of leagues, the theory part, I think, is a lot more critical than the, you know, specific player names. And it kind of gets everything under one umbrella, and it allows you, I think, to succeed ultimately, especially when you have more than one league.
Yeah, let's talk about a little bit about the theory here, because I was a guy I've been playing fantasy football for 25 years. I got into Dynasty about a decade ago. Started really doing that, and I I was in a lot of redraft leagues for what people, that don't play a lot of fantasy. I was in like 8 to 10 leagues, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're in 8 or 10 leagues," and that was just all redraft leagues with my friends, because I was the guy that everyone would ask when somebody dropped out of a league, like, "Hey, can you like join our league?" Because they knew I was into it, and so I always have a hard time saying no, so I jump into everybody's league. And then a couple years ago, I started really getting heavier into Dynasty and the Theory, because for me, I like the idea of that you could do multiple builds. There's different ways to draft your team. It wasn't like redraft where it's like, okay, do I have the number 1 pick? Am I going to get lucky with a good guy up top, or am I late? That type of thing where you could kind of build a team. Plus, I'm one of those guys, I always hated throwing my team back at the end of the year. I'm like, I love that team. I drafted an awesome team, and I got to throw them back every year. So the whole Dynasty thing to me was super appealing in that I like my players. I probably am on the other side of a lot of people. I get too attached to my guys, and I don't want to get rid of them, and I draft too many of the same player. I know you're big about diversifying in that, but let's talk a little bit about like just kind of diversification and Dynasty in general. Like, that's what I love about it. I can be in 30 leagues now, and it doesn't seem repetitive because all the scoring's different. I'm playing against different people. The setups are always slightly different. To me, that's what makes fantasy football so fun, that you could do so many different things. And again, there's more than one way to win. You don't have to do everything exactly by the book in order to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, like the different formats, even if it's, you could play in so many 12-team super flex leagues, but throw in different wrinkles and it changes the dynamic of the league. And for me, when it comes to formats, I like anything that's going to add positional value to more positions. I want there to be an emphasis on incorporating the quarterbacks, obviously super flex or 2 quarterback, or tight end premium leagues for the tight ends. But when you get that, and it's not your chalk, like just 1 quarterback, no tight end premium, just typical start 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, whatever the case may be. It's not the typical chalk where, okay, everybody kind of looks to build their team the same way. When you have these different wrinkles and these different settings, whether it's starting requirements or scoring, there really is, across the league, so many different ways. And you said it, JT, to build your team, that you see people really overvalue or undervalue one position over the other. And by default, then, because of that, it really starts to increase trading opportunities, because when you have people that don't value, even if it's just a position and group as a whole instead of a specific player, then you start to have more opportunities to make some moves. And it's funny that you mentioned, whereas maybe I looked at, I'm not looking exactly at a specific player. I know that you are a get your guy kind of guy. When we're in the Discord, when we're posting trade polls or talking about rookies, you're like, that's my 4th round rookie dart throw. I'm getting them. Or, I Steelers and Colts. Those are your dudes. So like, but again, like I can be successful. You can be successful doing what you're doing. There is no one way and no right answer. And that's why, like, when we have these trade questions, it's always like, okay, what are your league settings? What is the scoring? What's the league dynamic? Because we have these overall values across Dynasty in general, but you have to really break it down, and it gets even more specific in each and every league. Whereas, it's not just like the stock market where, like, okay, this is the price.
Yep.
Your league is your stock market. It's going to be different league to league, and just being able to have fun with it and build the way you want to build, whether it's just a numerical value that you're associating with a player, whether it's an actual name, I think that's all ways that allow Dynasty to really be, I mean, I don't want to knock on Redraft, but I think the premier format, Dynasty Theory, like, we love Dynasty. It's my first thought when I wake up, JT. It's the last thought before I go to bed.
I was laughing because I was telling people like before the draft, I was having like draft dreams of like Marvin Harrison Jr. getting drafted by the Colts. And I'm like, man, I might think about this probably a little too much if these are like the dreams I'm having heading into the draft.
Hey,
But
there's a lot worse vices out there than fantasy football.
that's for sure. But the best thing about Dynasty is it never goes away. You have it all year. That's what I love. It's like, it's not like, oh, I'm waiting around for football season. Like, yes, we are waiting for full football actual on TV back. But, you know, we've got the draft. We've got the schedule coming out here soon. I mean, we've got all kinds of stuff to lead us up that way. And then you got, if you're in Dynasty leagues, I spend all summer drafting. So it's like I'm not like waiting for the league to get back because I'm in it the whole summer. I've already probably drafted in 5 leagues, and I've got a few more coming, and I've gotten bigger. And I know you don't play it necessarily because I know we're in some Debbie leagues, but I've gotten to some C2C leagues this year. So now I'm double drafting because I'm drafting the NFL side and the college side. So I mean, I've got my girlfriend looks at me all the time. It's like, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm on the clock. And she just knows what that means now. Because I'm like, give me a second. I got to like concentrate before I get out of the car. We're going into dinner. I'm like, hold on. I'm on the clock. Let me like make sure I want to know what I want to do here. So
do you ever see that meme where it's the guy in bed with his girlfriend or wife and he's on his phone and she's like, I bet he's talking to other girls. And it's like for us, it's like, I know he's on the clock. I know he's crafting that trade to send out to a league mate. I know it.
I always laugh because I always bring up that meme because I like if me and my girlfriend are like watching a movie and she falls asleep on the couch or whatever, she'll wake up. It's like 2:30 a.m. on my phone. She's like, "Who are you texting?" I'm like, "I'm talking about trades on the Discord page right now with the guys in England. We're like sending them back and forth."
I always joke with my wife. I'm like, oh, you know, just talking to a bunch of dudes at 1 a.m. from 10 different countries. No big deal.
It's so funny because that's me. I'm like, don't worry, I'm not texting anybody else. I'm literally talking to a bunch of fantasy football geeks online. I'm like, it's no big deal. Like, and she at this point, she just knows it. She's like, my phone's constantly buzzing, notifications, and she just knows it's all fantasy football stuff all the time. So, speaking about that, let's get into a little bit of the talk of the Discord. So, I know a lot of people that when they go to start a show or they kind of are doing some writing, getting into a website possibly. I know the big conversation comes up is like, oh, do I need a Discord page? Should I start a Discord page? And one of the things I always tell people, I was like, I always suggest don't start one unless you're completely ready to take it on and pay attention to it. And the reason I say that, and I want your insights here, JB, because Dynasty Theory is my favorite Discord. I've been on it for a number of years now with you guys. To me, it's the most informative. It has such a good community. There's a ton of stuff to talk about. And I'm on a lot of Discords. I have to be honest, just it's dead. There is no talk, no chatter. If you post a poll, you're going to get one response 5 hours later if you're lucky. They're just, you know, at this point, everybody's like, I just got to have a Discord. If I have a podcast or I have a website, I have to have a Discord. And I'm like, you don't. If you don't run it right, it seems like a waste. Kind of tell me about kind of how you guys got going on the Dynasty Theory Discord, because it's really the first Discord I really got heavily involved in. And to today, it's still, like I said, my favorite Discord. So kind of tell me how you guys got that started and kind of built it up.
When we had the podcast going for a little bit, probably 2 years or so. And then we were like, okay, you know, we see all these people posting about their Patreons. You know, we start looking into it. We kick that off. For a while, it was like, we had 2 or 3 patrons just kind of chilling with us, hanging out. And it was like Mitch and I would be messaging each other like, okay, like we got to figure out something to like talk about with these people. Like we don't want them just sitting in there with no content, no discussions. And it really started from being engaged from the start and like taking pride in the community that you're building, because like, with us, like we get to know people. It isn't just, oh, you know, the JT's posting a poll, like let's answer it. That's it. Like you get to know not even just like who their favorite teams are, who their favorite players are, but where people are from, what are their hobbies, like you genuinely make a connection with people. And I think that really comes through in the way that we run the Discord and the activity level that we have. And there might be times that we are having full-blown conversations about things not even related to football. And it's just people chiming in left and right. Like I said, I think we have people from maybe 7 or 8 different countries. So I'll wake up in the morning here on the East Coast and I'm like catching up on everything that was going on overnight because everybody was up already. And, you know, having the Discord, like, so initially it was okay. And it was one with the Patreon. If you're a patron, you're in the Discord. And then it was like, okay, let's open this up to everybody. We have our patron channels, but we want to bring people in that, not everybody is in a ton of leagues. So you don't want to throw $5 a month for, conversations and content when you're in, a $110 league, but you want to be able to jump in these conversations whenever things come up. And that's something that we want to do. So we open it up to everybody. And then me, because I'm so indecisive and fickle, we closed it off from the public and went back to only the Patreon. And then we were like, okay, well, there's so much time going into this. Is it really worth it from a time commitment standpoint? We killed the Patreon and then we brought the Patreon back and we brought the Discord. So I think if you're going to do it, there's a few things. One, you have to be committed. You have to put the time in. You have to make those connections with people because they notice. And like you just said, you're in like 10 different Discords. Some of them, they're not very active. There's people in our Patreon and our Discord that will share that sentiment. And they're like, oh, I'm in so-and-so's Discord, great content, but they're not always available. They're not always in the Discord, whereas us, whether it's me, Mitch, or Dan, one of us is pretty much always in there. And, so you have to be committed if you're starting one. And another thing, and this was tough for me, like not comparing yourself to other people that have Discords or Patreons. And I still have that issue, JT. I look at other Discords that people have, and I'm like, shit, they got 2,000 people in there. Like, what? Holy cow. And you can get discouraged at times. And because I fall into that. But again, just kind of remembering why you're doing it. It's because you love fantasy football or whatever Discord you want to start. It doesn't have to be fantasy football, but you love the topic. You love engaging with the people and you want to make those connections. And I think all three pieces of those, that is extremely critical if you're going to have a successful Discord.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I always think, I think about me. I'm on there quite a bit. And I'm like, man, I can't imagine how much these guys are on there because everybody's always tagging you guys like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? But I do think it's nice in that Discord that it's not just you guys. There are a lot of other people kind of stepping up and answering questions. So it's not 100% on, Mitch, JB, coach, like, 1,000%. Will you guys just give me your answer? Like, people at least throwing in comments. I mean, I love the trade page. I think the trade page is super useful. We've had people, they use it there to say, hey, put up a trade. I haven't sent this yet. What do you guys think about it? If it's super one-sided, they're like, okay, what do I need to add? What do I need to change? And I think that's a great thing just to, be able to bounce that idea off people. Because that's always why I like to have a partner. I'm in a lot of leagues where I'm a co-owner. And I like to have somebody I can bounce the ideas off of. It's kind of nice. This is like I have 25, 40, 50 co-owners on a team where I can bounce ideas off of them and be like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I think it's good because, again, you see a lot of times there's like, oh, everybody's voting one way. But then you'll see like, oh, that's like 50-50. That's like one way or the other. And then you get some preferences in there. And sometimes it's just nice to kind of like talk it through with people like, okay, why do you like that more? Or like, oh, I'm this side. I really need this, and this. Like, okay, if you need, because that's how way I'm in a lot of them. I'm like, I could go either way on this poll. It depends on what you need. So
that's why I changed the poll type too. No, before it was like you could see everybody's votes. So of course groupthink comes into play a little bit. And you're like, oh, like everyone else decided, I'll just throw my vote there. But the built-in aspect, the poll function there that they have now, that I try to use, you don't see the other votes until you vote.
Yep.
So
I
like
was
you
laughing
start,
about that because that was me. I was like, I think it was like 2 nights ago. I was like, I had gotten behind. I hadn't went really paying attention. I saw there was a ton of polls up. I was like, I should go through and vote on these. So I went through and voted on like 10 or 15 polls, and they're all popping up. And I'm like, oh, I'm on the opposite side on like almost every one of these.
I've
I
had
was like, of
I had
course
one
I
earlier
am.
today. It had 8 votes already, and when I voted, it was 8-1. I was the one, and I was like, "Screw you guys! What are we doing here?"
I loved it because I'm like, I've been looking lately, and I'm like, man, I am on kind of I'm on the other side of that. But I always think
But
that's good too because
you said earlier, and I don't mean to interrupt, JT, but you
no,
said
no
earlier,
problem.
and this is what I love about it too. Like me, Mitch, and Dan, like we don't have to be in the conversations. Like I see you answering questions for people in our Discord about Devi or C2C questions because like I do some Devi, but that's certainly not my strength, and certainly not C2C. So like I know you're in there, Kev, Gordon, like so many people that like I feel like the opinion of so many people is valued in there, and there's great discussions even if we aren't involved, and that's something that I absolutely love to see in there.
Yeah, another one to bring on top of that, like IDP. I know you guys don't play IDP, but we have an IDP channel. It's super small. It's like a handful of us that are in there, but it's kind of nice because, like, if you're just looking for a little bit of tidbit from somebody, we'll go in there and tag everybody basically on that page and be like, hey, what do you think about this trade? Or should I pick up this guy or drop that guy? And, it's not like you need you know, 1,000 people to tell you one way. And sometimes it's just one or two. I just need somebody to give me some kind of confirmation, tell me yes or no, am I crazy or not. So I think I like that about your guys' Discord page too, is even though it's not stuff that necessarily you guys are always into, there are people in there, and then you can kind of, pick and choose which one of those you want to jump into. If it is C2C Devi page, the rookie page has been great, to jump in there and go through all the rookies when everybody's talking about this time of year, rookie drafts, what they've seen, what they haven't seen. And I tell you what, you guys do one of the things I like a lot. You guys do the NFL news page where you just post NFL news. And I tell you what, it's so much easier to go to that than to split through Twitter half the time, because you guys just pick out all the news from Twitter and put it on that page. So any kind of signings, any kind of thing happening with anyone, it's just a nice little quick refresher for me. I like to just go in there and like scroll out real quick and see if there's anything I missed or anything like that. So I appreciate just even that. So that's why I always kind of tell people, like, if you're going to get a Discord, get somewhere like it's more than one thing that you're discussing or things that you can kind of follow. And obviously, you can always say, like, put your name on one, follow some certain thread, the other ones you can basically say silence. I don't talk IDP. I don't talk Devi C2C.
I have the
like
IDP channel muted in my own Discord because I would add no value. But I like in the news channel the other day was a little slow. So Darren Waller getting divorced made the news page. But yeah, like we have a freaking books channel about books. Like people will be like, hey JB, can we get this added in there? Like we have additional sports. So like I know the NHL playoffs, people are loving that. Like I don't care about the NHL, but it's great to be able to have people that do and just enjoy those conversations.
Yeah, and I think that that kind of goes back to the sentiment of the DT Discord, is just that a lot of people have made friends and like want to talk about different stuff. And it's like, I think there's like a Spotify, iTunes, like play channel. People like just put in songs like, oh, have you listened to this? Throw stuff in there. I'll get on a kick one night and I'll throw like 10 different YouTube videos on there of different stuff sometimes. So I always think that's good. And then, hey, if you ever want to know where to eat and what to eat in different cities, we've got a lot of things covered there. We got pictures of food all over the place. People telling you where to eat and where not to. So like I said, I just love the community you guys kind of put together there. It's not the biggest one out there, but it's like the people that are in it are like in it, they care about it. And like I said, I haven't hardly met anyone that's in the Discord, like in real life, in person, but I feel like I know a lot of these guys. Like I know a lot what's going on with their life and their families and just like things.
Are you going to Canton this year?
I am. Last year was my first year going, so this year I'm going. So my plan is to try to meet up with you guys if you guys are there. Me and John McGlynn will be making the trek again. So pretty pumped about it. Last year I was a little bit like wasn't sure what was going on. It was my first time kind of like trying to feel it out, but I feel like I'm better prepared this year. Now I kind of know the lay of the land and what's happening, and I can like get a schedule of what I need to do and where I need to go. Because last year was just kind of like, I'm not sure what we're supposed to be doing, and I kind of was just floating all over the place. But yeah, it was a good time, and I'm definitely looking forward to going again this year.
Despite what I show on the podcast, and even like in discussions like this, like I was an anxious mess, and like at times, like I am an introvert. So when we were there 2 years ago, I'm like, oh, like that's so and so. I can't go say hi though, or like we talk on Twitter, like we and I'm like, nah, like I'll just sit here and just I got my crew here. I'll just stay here. But no, we'll definitely enjoy a few beverages out there.
Yeah, I tend to do the same thing. That's why John McGlynn's the best. He goes up and talks to anyone and everyone. He just like, JT, come talk to this guy, come meet this guy, like blah blah blah. He just I always think the funniest thing about that is everybody kind of knows each other by their Twitter handles, and then a lot of people don't have their actual picture on Twitter. So a lot of people, you're like, who is that person? And you see them, and you once you figure out the Twitter name, you're like, oh, okay, that's that guy. But you don't ever see what they look like because they don't have a picture of themselves and their name is not their name on on the page. So you're like, oh, okay, that's that guy. All right, that makes sense.
I mean, we have people in the Discord that don't use their name, and that's like Ron. His name's not Ron. I'm not going to call him his real name. Like
it's so funny. I remember the first time I was messaging him about a trade in a league about something, and he was like, "Oh no!" He told me what his real name was. I was like, "What?" He's like, "Oh yeah, that's just like a Twitter." I was like, "That is crazy." I would never even have thought that wasn't his name, but now that's what just everybody calls him. They know him by, so it's so funny.
In the Discord, he's been quiet lately, but Corduroy, I called him Cord the whole time in Canton. Not going to call you real name. This is what I know you by. That's exactly.
It would almost be weird to call him by something else because it's like that's how you identify them. It's like, well, and then the one that always throw me off is when people change their name. I'm like, wait, who's this? Oh, that was
yep.
Who was it? Has their Twitter's the artist formerly known as
Jewy. Yeah, Jewy.
It's like he changed his name, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "You guys can't do that to me. You're throwing me all off. I don't know who's who anymore." So it was great. So if you're looking to start a Discord, take what John had to say. I'm sure, feel free to message him on Twitter, ask him some questions about how they kind of got going. Like I said, I'm on quite a few, and that one is my favorite. I'm on there. I would say 90% of the time I'm on Discord. I'm on the Dynasty Theory Discord. So great group of guys there and things going there. John, now let's talk about what everybody came here for. They want to talk about your sheets, your spreadsheets. You're the spreadsheet guy. Everybody knows you as part of the Patreon package. You get your Google Drive of all your sheets, all the different things. Kind of talk to me about, you said you're a numbers guy. Talk about how you kind of set this up and get going. And then from there, we're going to jump into kind of your rookie rankings pre and post draft.
Yeah. So I went to school for applied math. And now I work in real estate. So not too much mathematics, but like for me, again, because I don't have necessarily the film watching eye. I didn't play the game. Obviously, you pick up on things through things that people talk about and just watching football on a constant basis over how many years. But for me, the easiest way to really get involved was spreadsheets, whether it's like a threshold scoring system that I do for the incoming rookies, whether it's the cross positional and rookie tiers. Like, so for me, the cross positional tiers, it's like what I'm most active and involved in, you could say, with the patrons. And that took a lot of time to get set up. So I have my obviously quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, the corresponding pick that I would look at in the current draft, the 1 year out pick. So where would that kind of go? But like trying to figure out, okay, where are the market inefficiencies? Where are the values? Like I use Dynasty Daddy positional ADP. I use Fantasy Calc, their live positional and overall ADP that they have available. So like finding where I'm higher or lower than the general market. And a lot of time, like there will be great conversations going back and forth in the Patreon about it. People are like, oh, like I disagree with this, or I like this, but I would do this. But like again, that's where, at least for me, like the market inefficiencies come into play, because more people might view this player up a tier. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I can get a plus with the guy that I actually prefer. And it's just things like that. But using that to gain an edge and incorporating different source data that is getting, whether it's from ADP or actual trades that go through, but getting information from the general dynasty market in general. I truly live and die by my tiers. Like when I'm making a trade, like I'm in there myself. When I'm going through my rookie drafts, I have it up, and for the most part, I would say stick with it. Sometimes it's like, okay, I haven't had this player yet. Maybe I'll just, do this. But like, even if you have a player in a certain tier, especially like, let's say it's a startup, you don't have to take them at that spot because you're so much higher than the market. So it's like, okay, I can wait around on him. But it's incorporating all kind of live data. And it's something that I know a lot of people, as patrons, they use it on a daily basis.
So let's, you got your old set of rankings. That's going to take a long time to go through. We do all that. But what I want to do, because obviously we're in rookie, draft season. Everybody in Dynasty's got their rookie draft either is happening now or is upcoming. Let's talk about, me and you are on the same page in that I'm a big fan of doing a pre-draft ranking and a post-draft ranking, because I want to see where I kind of think about these players before I see landing spot, and then I want to adjust to landing spot afterwards and decide, am I adjusting too much one way or the other? Did I have a guy ranked 10th, and am I crazy moving him to 3 because I like the landing spot, or moving a guy from 3 to 10 because I hate the landing spot? So I like to kind of look at that to see, hopefully, so I'm not overreacting too much to kind of what's taking place. Let's kind of talk about your process and kind of go through the rankings you got right now. And let's talk about some of the guys, pre-post draft that might have changed the most from you, and kind of, start off by kind of talking about your process of the pre-draft and then the post-draft.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier kind of threshold scoring. So I go through for each position, and I have a completely separate rookie sheet as well that, I'm going through draft capital. So obviously that's going to be post-draft, but draft age, breakout age, athleticism scores, the relative athletic score, different metrics like touchdown, team market shares of touchdowns, yards, receptions. So going through that across each position, and it gives me an idea of guys that, okay, I have my baseline. And with all of this, I kind of, I pay attention closely to the mock database for the NFL mock drafts. And okay, like this guy projected to go maybe 3rd round. And based on that, with historical data, this is what my threshold score is, because they meet all these minimum thresholds across the board. So for me, it kind of gives you that baseline. And then once we get the draft data, there's guys that slip because of you have that expected draft capital and you don't have that. Or, there's a guy that you didn't expect to go super early and he did. So there are going to be adjustments. For the most part, I would say most players here, looking at my final pre-draft from April 24th to my rookie rankings and tiers now, I would say most guys are within one tier of where they were. And then not only just within one tier, but maybe in the same tier, but they are flipped around within that tier. And as much as we want to say landing spot doesn't matter, you need the opportunities, you need the right system, you need the right organization and structure that's going to allow you to develop and flourish. And I think that does come into play. And sometimes it comes into play a little bit too much for folks. And that's where the market inefficiencies come into play, because you have this great prospect, but the landing spot might not have been great. And that's kind of what we saw with AJ Brown. That was the poster child for this a few years ago. I always say Mitch and I before the draft, we were like, he is landing spot proof. He is not dependent on a premier landing spot. I went to Tennessee and we were like, all right, we're going to drop him a little bit in our rankings now. So hopefully you learn your lesson a little bit from those past mistakes, but it still does come into play. And I think fit, especially film folks, they can look at this a lot better from like a running back perspective. Do they excel with zone or gap or man or whatever? And does this team run primarily out of that? So you have fits from that regard. But yeah, I agree with you. I like to have like my first set of tiers. Like I go through once the college season wraps up, I'm able to get in there and finalize all of the data because I need their final season data. But the first list of tiers that I put together for the rookies was February 8th. And I have February 8th, March 3rd, March 9th, April 10th, April 24th, April 28th, and now. So it's fun to see that progression. And it's like, oh man, like Troy Franklin on February 8th. I was like, he's my 109. Based on the data we have available, I think he's going to be a top 40 pick. Well, he wasn't. So he drops down obviously a little bit over time, but tinkering with the data and to get that baseline information in the threshold scoring, going through and finding kind of hit rates and how they correspond to different levels and do they meet expectations. I have an absolute blast doing it. And I'll talk to people and they're like, oh, there's probably ways to automate this a little bit. I was like, I like to get in there. I like to see the data I'm working with. I like to be able to put the numbers in and get a feel for it. And, for the most part, especially over the last few years, really working on that, like the last really, really bad miss I had was Keyshawn Vaughn. And that is when I started to really get in there and look at, okay, what went wrong here? And there were so many things that went wrong, but trying to limit that negative impact overall and seeing where we can fix it and adjust. I think that's part of the fun too. So that's kind of my process in a nutshell.
Yeah, I like, looking at that she's being able to see where you went from time to time, because there was a couple guys you were higher early in the process than a lot of other people. Look, going all the way back to your February date, you had JJ McCarthy in there at 110, where a lot of people were like, is he even a first rounder? And you had him at 110. You had a lot of those running backs. You had Estime a little higher than most people, but you had Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks right there, right behind him. And just kind of seeing where those guys kind of went up and down. Let's talk about your last rankings right before the draft and then post-draft rankings. Let's talk about some of the guys that moved up or down for you, specifically either landing spot or you just, with the draft capital, you're like, man, I thought that guy was going to be drafted a lot higher, or he did get drafted a lot higher. And you're like, all right, do I like him now because he did get drafted higher or not? Kind of going through your top guys, post-draft. You're right up there with a lot of people. Caleb Williams at 1, Marvin Harrison at 2, Jane Daniels at 3, Malik Neighbors at 4, Drake May at 5, Brock Bowers 6, JJ McCarthy 7, Roma Dunze 8, Brian Thomas 9, Bo Nix 10, Xavier Worthy 11, and Ladd McConkey 12. So let's talk about a little bit about that, because some of these guys you had pretty similar. You had Ladd McConkey was right in that range. Bo Nix was right in that range. The biggest mover, it looked like to me, you didn't have a ton. Drake May was kind of maybe one of the guys that was like higher than moved a little lower earlier in the rankings. Kind of talk about some of these guys that you like now better or worse, or are they kind of right where you thought they would be?
Yeah, there are a few guys in, like, from a landing spot perspective, and to give some context, I'll say where I had them previously as well. But like Ricky Pearsall, I thought he was going to go in the second round of the NFL draft. I had him wide receiver 8-9 tier, and I had him right around that 210, 211. Now, if you told me, hey, Ricky Pearsall goes in the first round of the NFL draft, okay, he's going to bump up a little bit. He's still at 208 for me, so he really didn't see any movement. He actually dropped in relation to other wide receivers. Like that 49ers landing spot, for better or worse, he's a player I don't think I have one share of. I know obviously there's the talks about Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk possibly being traded this year. Now it sounds like, okay, they're going to be set for at least 2024. So Ricky Pearsall could be a guy that maybe you get an impatient manager, you can get a discount on him throughout the 24 season. And then maybe next off season, they explore something. Okay, they feel comfortable with what they have and they move off of Deebo or Brandon Ayuk, and Ricky Pearsall really sees a jump. JJ McCarthy, not so much from a ranking standpoint, but from a tier perspective, I bumped him up into that, somewhat large tier of Malik Neighbors, Drake May, Brock Bowers, JJ McCarthy, Rome Odunze. And because I had a real separation between 108 and 109, I traded up to get a good amount of 108s. And because of that, JJ McCarthy, I think, is going to be my most rostered rookie quarterback, because typically he's been the one. There's some variance between Drake May and JJ McCarthy, but for the most part, JJ McCarthy is the quarterback that's slipping there. And then like Brian Thomas, again, he has not really moved for me. I like the landing spot. I like the draft capital. I had him as my wide receiver 4 pre-draft. I still have him as my wide receiver 4, but I have very little Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, and Jonathan Brooks, because Brian Thomas has been slipping. He's been going 112, 201, 202 for the most part. And because of that, like, I've been taking him there, and same with Bo Nix. I've been getting a decent amount of Bo Nix, but like lower guys, trying to see exactly, let's see. Like the running backs are interesting because you have your 2 in Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks. And then pretty much in every single rookie draft I've done, you see a drop. And then you get into the Corums, the Lloyds, maybe Jalen Wright. That's kind of the top 5 then. And then it's the Wild West. It's, who really interests you. There's a profile for everybody. And you could make a case for so many of these guys, like Will Shipley. If Saquon Barkley goes down, there's so much contingent value. Audric Estime, we've already heard Peyton talk about his expectation for him, and Javonte Williams might be gone next year. Bucky Irving, there's hype pieces about all these guys, and it's only Rachaad White above him in Tampa. You got Lloyd in Green Bay with Josh Jacobs. Corum, he's a clone of Kyron Williams. He's going to get work, and he has the draft capital that Kyron Williams doesn't have. So like, there's so many guys. The biggest riser for me, and if you would have told me this pre-NFL draft and that he was one of my most rostered wide receivers, I would have said you were crazy. Xavier Leggett, like he's another one. He has the first round draft capital, kind of an interesting landing spot. A lot of people see it as a bad landing spot in Carolina. He a lot of things similarly from a profile perspective to Jonathan Mingo. I think he's a better prospect than Jonathan Mingo was, but he's 207, 208, 209. I'm getting a first round wide receiver with some questionable profile standpoints and in aspects, like especially the super late breakout, but that's already baked into his price. So I think Xavier Leggett's been one of those guys that rose for me. And Jalen Polk too. I thought he was going to go in the 3rd round. He gets top 40 draft capital, possibly to be the wide receiver 1 in an offense where you have a quarterback now in Drake May that has shown he's willing to sling it. So this isn't the New England Patriots that they were rolling out Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, Cam Newton. Like I think the Patriots could be one of those surprising stories this year, where we kind of talked about Seattle 2 years ago, Houston last year. Am I saying New England is going to be like Houston exactly? No, I'm not saying that, but I think they're could be on the uptick. So those are a few guys. And Devontae Walker, I was high on him at the beginning of the process, and now I'm like, I don't even want to think about Devontae Walker.
I was going to tell you, I'm the same way. I was looking at your rankings. I'm the same way. He was a guy that I was already like a little iffy about coming into the draft prospect, just where everything he's done. He was decent when he finally played for Carolina, but then he did not look good in the Senior Bowl. He just the whole draft process did not seem to go well for him. And then he turns around and he ends up on the Ravens, which, we hate to say like, oh, well, you got Lamar, you got a good quarterback. Why is that a bad spot? It's just like, I never like any of these guys being on the Ravens because they never seem to kind of bust out. So he's a guy I haven't picked him once. And I'm not sure how far you'd have to drop for me to actually take him. To be honest with you, there's so many guys around him that I'm like, I'd almost take 5 or 6 guys in the same area as him that I just he never gets to me where I'm like, okay, it's so late that now I have to think about taking him. It's like, there's always somebody else I like better right there.
I think I scooped him in the 5th round of one. And it's so funny.
I think that's where I'm at. If he got to the 5th, I might just take it because I'm like, it's a 5th rounder. But man, he's a guy that's fallen for me. For like, I just looking at your rankings, like Polk moved up almost a whole round for you. He went from like 3-6 to around 2-6, and then Xavier Legette, for me too. He's a guy that I'm loving in drafts because I originally coming into the draft, I know people are out on the late breakout, and I was doing mock drafts pre-draft, and he was like going anywhere from the end of the 1st round to like early 2nd round, like early in the process. And then like, as more people talked about the late breakout, he kind of slipped more and more in mock drafts, and he was getting like later 2nd. I even got a few, he got into the 3rd, and I was like, if he's going into the 3rd, I'm all over him in the 3rd. And then he got taken in Carolina in the 1st round, which I was with you. I was like, I liked him a lot, but I thought, man, mid-2nd round is as high as he's going to go.
Right.
Like, nobody's going to take that high of a chance on him. And then when he went in the 1st round, I'm like, I don't love Carolina and I don't love Bryce Young, but man, it's like him and Deontay Johnson. And then the aging Adam Thielen, and then Mingo, who I actually think the Mingo thing is helping if you like him, because people who are mad about Mingo now think that Legette is Mingo. They're like, they think he's the same player. So I'm loving it because he's dropping in drafts. I had some late seconds that I thought there was I'm like, am I going to have to overdraft him in the 1st? Now I'm just waiting to see if he gets me in the 2nd, because I'm getting that mid to late 2nd. He's falling there in a lot of drafts. And for me, I absolutely love it. I think the guy can be really good. I know a lot of the analytics say no, but I watched him a ton at South Carolina last year on not a very good team. And man, he was really good against some pretty good defenses. So I'm high on Legette.
I put together the rookie draft tracker that I included in the tiers, and Legette's going 207 on average, as low as 211 in the drafts that I'm in. So it was probably me that took him at 211 and said, I'm not letting him slip anymore.
Yeah, I love it.
And he might bust. He very well might bust. But at that price, I'm willing to find out.
That's where I'm at with you. I even if he ends up not making it, I'm like, man, if I can get a mid to late 2nd, I'm on a guy who's a 1st rounder. I'll take the shot. I'll take the shot. And if he doesn't make it, he doesn't make it. But to me, it's kind of worth it. I was just kind of look through here a couple other guys maybe you want to talk about. I mean, a big riser, especially in tight end premium leagues, Ben Sinnett out of Kansas State, going 2nd round to the Commanders. I mean, he was a guy that, I saw people come around late to him in the draft process. I originally had him as my tight end. I was like 3-4-ish. And then I kind of moved him up to my tight end 2 behind Bowers. I started like watching him a little more, and I'm like, man, I kind of like him more than Jatavian Sanders, which I was a little surprised I was going to say that. But once I watched him at the combine and then went back and looked at some other stuff, I'm like, I might like him a little bit better. And so I moved him up my tight end 2. When he went 2nd round, I was, I always think we get sort of shockers with these tight ends. You never quite know where the NFL is going to value him. Cliff Kingsbury's not known for really using the tight end a lot. So what do you think about Sinnett here? Because I'm a little all over the place. I like him as a player. I'm a little worried about how many targets he's going to get. But, I mean, Zach Ertz is pretty old. Let's be honest. Like he was already starting to lose some share to McBride before they basically asked for the trade. And so I think he gets a lot of work. I'm just worried, is he going to end up being a lot more of an H-back and blocker than they actually use him in the passing game?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And looking at the range, he's going 205 to 310, but some of those are like 2 PPR for tight ends. Some of those are non-tight end premium. So it's kind of hard to gauge the tight ends there. But I do have him as my tight end too. But he is, for the most part, been going a little bit earlier than I want to take him. So I haven't ended up with too many shares, but the opportunity is going to be there again. I think he's versatile. You hear the way they talk about him in terms of being a blocker. We're not getting fantasy points for that. But I think if that, you get in the coach's good graces, you're on the field, especially with Zach Ertz is really the only competition at tight end. I think we do see Ben Sinnott quite a bit. And if you're in 2 PPR leagues, like end of the second, I'm okay with him there. But I've seen like early second, I can't get on board with that. There's just a little bit too much risk there. Like you said, we see these tight ends get taken early. Sometimes you're like, whoa, it kind of reminds me of like Dalton Keene. He kind of came out of nowhere, gets the 3rd round draft capital, and you start seeing people get hyped about him. Like I remember we did a sleeper show that off season, and I put on Twitter, like, drop your biggest sleeper that like you're all in on. And there were several people that brought up Dalton Keene, and we kind of saw how that played out. Hopefully Ben Sinnott doesn't follow in those footsteps.
Let's talk about coming up on last 10 minutes or so of the show. Let's talk about 2 wide receivers that are kind of on the opposite spectrums, and this is surprising me because they got drafted right next to each other in the NFL draft, and that's Luke McCaffrey and Troy Franklin. McCaffrey went at the end of the 3rd to Washington. Franklin slipped all the way to the 4th to the Broncos, and it was like people are just like the free for all on Franklin. Then all of a sudden he goes in the 4th. But it goes to the Broncos with Bo Nix. And now everybody seems to be right back on board. And the one guy that I see just dropping in drafts and seems like almost forgotten is Luke McCaffrey, who went in the 3rd round to Washington. Kind of what do you think about those 2 guys?
Yeah, McCaffrey, he's one that analytically, I talk about the threshold scoring, and like this is where context matters. Like Luke McCaffrey, he wasn't a wide receiver early in his career. And then at Rice, he puts up 2 solid seasons. And, but again, like he's not going to check like early declare status, breakout age status. Like there's a lot of things that he isn't going to stand out on from an analytical perspective. Whereas Troy Franklin, he's like top of the charts in so many different categories that I'm looking at. And, for me, I don't have many shares of Luke McCaffrey. I'm taking chances on some of the running backs that we've mentioned that are kind of in those murky situations. Troy Franklin, I have him at 304. So still for the most part lower than market, and I haven't been able to snag too many shares. And I have Luke McCaffrey at the 403. We talk about crowded rooms, and we're expecting Jaden Daniels to be able to come in as a rookie and support whether it's McLaurin, Dotson, and or McCaffrey. I just, maybe this one is too much tunnel vision on my part with the analytical perspective, but Luke McCaffrey, just a player that I'm not actively going out to acquire. Whereas I know Dan on Dynasty Theory, he loves all of these legacy guys. He's like, oh, if you got NFL in your blood, I'm all over you. I'm good to go. So like, this is his perfect draft class. Luke McCaffrey, Brendan Rice,
Frank Gore Jr.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr. We got everybody. I mean, it's like the whole crew, everybody I grew up watching, everybody I first got into fantasy football, and now that all their sons are on here, that tells you how long I've been playing fantasy football. Okay, I like McCaffrey, but he's kind of one of those guys I'm waiting on. If he falls to me like late 3rd, early 4th, I'm snagging him up. Do I think he has a big year this year? No. I feel like he's definitely a guy that's going to need at least 2 years in the league. if he is going to end up being that good wide receiver for fantasy, it's just going to take him time. I think he's got the athletic profile, but it's just, again, a guy who hasn't played much wide receiver in his life. It's just going to take some time for me. And then also working with another rookie quarterback. So I'm taking him if I'm willing, if I got room to stash. If I can stash him on a taxi squad, I'm doing that because I don't expect to play him at all. Let's talk about some running backs. Go ahead, Jamie.
I just had 2 draft picks here like 5 minutes ago. And at 402 in a 12-team Superflex 2 PPR for tight ends, I took Will Shipley over Luke McCaffrey. And again, Will Shipley might ultimately be absolutely nothing, but it's kind of that contingent value that I'm looking at with him. And then at 309, I took Javon Baker over Luke McCaffrey. So just to kind of show where I am on those guys.
Yeah, and I'm there with Baker. I'm probably taking Baker over McCaffrey too if he's still there. Let's just here to kind of finish things up. Let's talk about these running backs because this is like a really convoluted group. And getting on the Discord, this is the one I've seen a million questions about. Everybody's like, "Who do you guys like?" And I feel like this is the group that to me has totally changed from before the draft and after draft. I've been a Trey Benson guy, number one. Since last year, he was at Florida State. I've kind of pounded, the drum.
You and I were talking about him in Devy drafts last year.
Absolutely. I grabbed him in Devy. I think you might have got him as well in a Devy. I was like, hey, man, he's my guy. I think if he can get a good landing spot, I just really like everything he does. I love the Arizona landing spot. I like what that offense is doing. Kyler now, McBride, Marvin Harrison. Still some James Conner there, but I think that's going to be able to let Benson kind of ease into it. But I really like him. I like that offense. So he's still my RB1. I know a lot of people are on Jonathan Brooks. Brooks is 2 for me. I just like that offense better in Arizona. And while I love James Conner, he is 29. He has missed some time. I think the Cardinals, we've seen them have to go deep down the bench a couple of times for running back. So I think Benson's definitely going to see some more time. So he's up there with me. I think Jonathan Brooks, most people either have 1 or 2 with that Panthers landing spot. But then it gets real convoluted. Lloyd, I was kind of like Corum was like my 3. Lloyd was my 4. Ray Davis, who everybody makes fun of because I love Ray Davis. He was my 5. And then I was kind of like, okay, I like Jalen Wright. I like some of these other guys after that. I had Shipley in my top 10. I liked him at number 8. But these landing spots are wild because all of a sudden Jalen Wright, who I wasn't a huge Jalen Wright guy because I just thought he had to be in the right perfect system. Well, then he gets the perfect system. Miami is tailor-made for his game. So that helps him. You got Lloyd, who I really like a lot. Now is he stuck behind Jacobs? Now is it a 1-year deal and Jacobs gone? And all of a sudden Lloyd's going to be worth a ton next year. So you got to get on him now. And then you got the Blake Corum situation. For me, it's weird because I'm like, he is Kyren Williams. I feel like he was a better college version of Kyren Williams. So then I'm like, okay, is that the same guy? So what does that leave on the bone there for Corum if they're pretty much the same player? So we'll talk about those 3 because those are kind of the guys grouped together. And then I'll ask your thoughts on Ray Davis because people get tired of me constantly hyping him. I want to hear what you have to say about kind of those 4 running backs. How are you approaching this post-draft?
So right now, for me, it's Marshawn Lloyd, then Blake Corum, then Jalen Wright, and they're all super close together. They're all in the same tier for me. So if I had the opportunity, across 10 different leagues to draft each of them, maybe I'd have 3, 3, and 4, and I think all of them, they have the opportunity. Like you could tell yourself that story. Marshawn Lloyd in Green Bay with Josh Jacobs. Yes, he signed the 4-year deal, but essentially it's 1-year deals, one after the other with easy outs. Blake Corum, if anything were to happen to Kyren Williams, you just put him right in there. And he still might take some work from Kyren Williams. And then Jalen Wright, if anything happens to Raheem Mostert, oh my God. Like that is a premier landing spot, but he's slipping in drafts. Blake Corum is slipping. Marshawn Lloyd is slipping because they're not going to come in day one and have the hype and have the expectation that they're going to get this work. So prior to the NFL draft, it was Benson and Brooks,
Yep.
brain fart, right there together. They really didn't move for me post draft. And then I had a big group of Blake Core, Marshawn Lloyd, Bucky Irving, Audric Estime, Braylon Allen sitting there in that 206 to 208 ish range. Then I had Will Shipley and Jalen Wright after that. The NFL draft, I bumped Bucky down a little bit. I bumped Estime down. I love Estime. I have very few shares up to this point. And then Braylon Allen completely threw him off my board, basically. And Jalen Wright flipped up into the Blake Core and Marshawn Lloyd tier. I think one of them this year, because of something that might happen to, like, realistically speaking, from a probability standpoint, one of the running backs in one of those situations is probably going to get a chance because of an injury. Obviously, we don't know who it's going to be, but like, for the most part, I have not snagged too many shares of them because, like, I'm taking the shot on the upside in a Jermaine Burton. I'm taking the shot on the upside in a Malachi Corley. Like, I just haven't been able to land too many of those running backs because, like I talked about with Brian Thomas Jr. earlier, like, he's slipping to a point that I haven't landed many Xavier Worthies or Ladd McConkey's. And it's kind of similar with the wide receivers here in this range with these three running backs. And then you mentioned Ray Davis. I think he's fine. Like, he's another one, though. If James Cook goes down, Ray Davis, he does a lot of things really, really well. I would feel comfortable taking him. You know, if you said you had him in the 307 tier, I wouldn't bat an eye. I have him right there at 312, 401. So, like, it's pick your poison.
That's kind of where I'm taking him, because I'm the same as you. I've looked at a lot of those other running backs, and I'm like, I just want one of these wideouts in the second round instead. So I've been going wideout in the second round, and then that's where I've been jumping on Ray Davis as the third round, about 3.5 to 310, 311, 312. It's hard for him to get in the fourth in leagues I'm in because I talk about him so much. So somebody stakes me on him. So usually I have to get him. I've got him as high as early third round, but that's only because I either didn't have a pick later coming, or I was like really nervous that I wasn't going to get a shot at him, so I overdrafted him.
That happens when you're in a lot of leagues sometimes.
And I just like that landing spot because he does do the opposite of what James Cook does. Like, he is a bigger guy. He's a more powerful back. He's a better goal line guy. He has much better hands. James Cook has had some fumbling issues, and Ray Davis does not put the ball on the ground. He does not fumble. So I like that spot for him. I don't expect him to go in, take that number one spot, do anything like that. But I just think they're going to work him in more than people realize. And then, like you said, if anything happens to James Cook, I think he automatically shoots up big time in drafts. And I'd just rather take a shot on a guy like him in the third and take a wideout I like better in the second, for me personally. Because I have no problem waiting and taking Estime or Davis. I don't have a lot of Bucky Irvin just because of that situation. I feel like he is very similar to Rachaad White. And so that's like, it's a tough. He's like, okay, if White got hurt, well, now it looks really good because they're very similar players. You can just step in.
And that's kind of the Blake Core and Kyron Williams situation.
Exactly. So it's like, if I have one of those guys, I'm definitely handcuffing him. So that's where I'm at on those. I'm like, oh, if I've got one of the starters, I'm taking the other guy because I think they could be successful if they get in there. So I love that.
Here's my thing too, and you kind of mentioned it, taking the wide receiver in the second, and then if any of these running backs that really stand out to you in the third, take your shot. You're big with Devi. This 25 running back class is pretty strong.
Smoked. Yeah, they're smoking. It's
deep. A strong class. There's a lot of high-end talent. There's some solid depth. There are impending free agents there's going to be the running back carousel that we see every year. So even if one of these guys that we do like a Will Shipley, a Bucky Irving, a Ray Davis, whoever the case may be, comes out, gets an opportunity, shows out, it's really tough to see any type of longer term value with these guys. And that's part of my hesitation and why I am leaning some of these wide receivers, because again, the bottom is the floor is very low and the bottom could fall out very quickly. But like if a Jermaine Burton comes out, let's say T. Higgins is gone and he pops off, that's a tremendous value there. Malachi Corley, now he might be living with Aaron Rodgers. They're bunk buds, like there's going to be that narrative. And if he comes out and does some things, so there's just the wide receiver profiles. I prefer it at that point in the draft. And my expectation is that outside of Benson and outside of Brooks, the running back market is going to be very volatile, as it typically is. And it's going to be very difficult for these guys because of the situation they're in and the influx of talent coming in next year for them really to return a longer term value.
Yeah, to finish up the show here, give us a couple of your late round guys, fourth, fifth round guys you're taking stabs at. I've really been high on Cade Stover. He was one of those guys that I wasn't quite sure where he fit. And then the Houston landing spot got me all excited because I liked him with CJ Stroud at Ohio State. He was just that guy that played the middle. Dalton Schultz, with all the things kind of going with him, they re-signed him, but I think, Stover could make some room there. So he's kind of one of my favorite guys. And I know we talk about not liking Ricky Purcell because of that 49ers wide receiver room, but I kind of like Jacob Cowing. I don't know why, but I think he's a guy that could end up finding a space in there. Probably not this year, but eventually. Those are two guys I'm kind of, got my eye on in the fourth and fifth rounds in drafts. Kind of what are some of the late round guys you kind of are like, these are the guys I'm kind of looking for. And when they get to you, you're excited that you get them.
Rasheen Ali.
I love Rasheen Ali.
4'11", 412 to close out drafts. If you have 4 rounds, I've been taking him. I need to update this, but as of yesterday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, Cade Stover was my 7th most rostered rookie. So I'm right there with you on Cade Stover. Landing spot is going to keep him down early, but I kind of like Jared Wiley's profile. I think he's going to be an interesting one. Somebody in the Discord said he is going to be what we wanted Noah Gray to be whenever Travis Kelce is done. And I think that could be the case. Tyrone Tracy, we talk about Luke McCaffrey not really having the wide receiver experience. You have Tyrone Tracy, similar from a running back perspective. Isaac Guerendo, I think he can win out that number 2 job in San Francisco. And if anything were to happen to Christian McCaffrey, that explosiveness, kind of what we talked about with Jalen Wright going to Miami, Isaac Guerendo right there in San Francisco. So the big ones for me, I would say that I'm really getting a lot of Cade Stover, Jared Wiley in tight end premium leagues, 2 PPR, Rasheen Ali, 5th round rookie there in Baltimore. I've been scooping up late round shares of him. And then Isaac Guerendo, people were really hyped about him. He had that blazing speed, but then he goes to San Fran. So people are kind of like, I've been scooping him up a lot too.
Very nice. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on. Let everybody know they can find you. It's the Dynasty Theory, the Discord, X, all that good stuff.
Yeah, find me on X at the Bauer Club. Not exactly the most active person on there because I'm constantly in the Discord, like JT talked about earlier. But I'm at the Bauer Club on Twitter or X. Dan Lamagna is at FF Coach Dan. Mitch is at Dino MC. They're my 2 incredible co-hosts at Dynasty Theory. We got the Discord. We got the Patreon. Follow us on YouTube, Dynasty Theory Fantasy Football Show. And then on X at Dynasty Theory FF. JT, this was an absolute blast. We're going to have to talk more often and not just in the Discord. And then we're going to have a few beverages together in Cannes. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I'm just pumped we finally got this on. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while and just couldn't get schedules lined up and everything. But I really appreciate coming on. My first show of the Stew with JT Brew on Fantasy and Frames. This is going to be the new home of the Stew this year. So we're pumped about being here. Check out all their show Wednesday nights, just packed with shows all night on Fantasy and Frames. I end out the night with Jorge on Shoot the Gap for a little IDP talk. So make sure to check us out there. And I'll have a bunch more stuff coming up on the Stew as the season goes on. And when the season starts, I'll have some new features of some things I'm doing. Again, thanks, JB, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Check them out at Dynasty Theory, the podcast. If you get a chance to go look at that Discord, kind of peruse it. I've sent a couple people there. It's a great community, great Discord there. And again, if you got any questions about starting a Discord or anything like that, send JB a message over there at the Bauer Club. Everybody, thanks for joining us again. You've been watching The Stew with JT Brew here on Fantasy in Frames. We'll check you next time.